Hi, welcome to another episode of the Visual Storytelling Today podcast. The show is designed for you, the marketer or entrepreneur, who may be looking for more effective ways to connect better with audiences through the exciting world of visual storytelling. We will introduce you to inspiring experts from diverse industries that bring fresh perspectives on how to capture attention, build trust, emotional empathy, and last but not least, drive business results. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Shlomi Ron. I'm the CEO of the Visual Storytelling Institute. We are a think tank based here in sunny Miami, Florida. And we're all about bringing the gospel of visual storytelling from the world of art into marketing. So part of the work we do is really helping brands bring to life their brands through the power of visual storytelling. We do it through consulting, training, and thought leadership, like this podcast you're in right now. So one of the interesting topics that I actually followed in the past year was really how, the communication noise is really driving brands into a very difficult spot. Unlike 20 years ago, we have consumers, content creators on the same footing as brands in terms of access to communication channels, and that creates a lot of challenges to break through the clutter. So one of the things that I've noticed is how brands use brand purpose to really stand out from the rest and really bring a deeper meaning to new generation of audiences that are much more sophisticated than we used to know from the past. So to help me tackle this exciting topic, which is really, we're going to touch today on one example of how brand purposes come to life through sponsored films. So to help me kind of unpack this exciting topic, I'm super excited to have Sarah Colamarino, and she is she's coming out of a 30-year career at Johnson & Johnson, holding a variety of roles in marketing communications. And actually her last role was a vice president, corporate brand equity and partnerships. And right there, she covered some award-winning programs that we're going to touch on today. And as of recent, she started her own consulting business, SC Blueprint. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and very excited about the topic.
No, I think it's something that if people don't get, the purpose, they don't have any business around it. You got to have deeper meaning that's really anchored in meaning. So before we go deeper into this, maybe share with us a little bit about your backstory. If you remember your early days, what was your magic moment that pushed you into career in marketing communication?
It really was the recognition of the power of purpose. It's interesting when you leave a long time career, you have a moment to reflect and think about it. And I realized that the power of purpose, while I didn't call it that throughout my career, was very much how I was able to really help organizations grow. And that purpose work grew internally, and it aligned organizations and it ignited and motivated organizations, but it gave the platform that allowed many companies to go out into the marketplace. And I've worked at small J&J companies all the way up to the corporate level and instituted the power of purpose at small companies as well as the big, large $85 billion corporation. So I think I have a pretty good handle on the topic, and it was magic for me. And frankly, it gave me throughout my career really deep meaning to the work that I did. And I was one of those people who was fortunate to work at a wonderful corporation and love every moment of it.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. It's funny how you describe brand purpose. In my context, I always call it brand narrative. I'm wondering if you find that aspect in your work as well, because to me, like the narrative is like, the emotional load of why the brand exists and what do you believe in, kind of setting the emotions with your external and internal audiences.
Yeah. So I really believe, and from my experience, the best purpose was a co-created purpose across the organization. It involved the C-suite as well as people down in the organization that would lead from the future. Right. And from there, you could build a narrative that was engaging and that
Mhm.
brought people in. And interesting, what I learned is the power of those of us who grew up in the world of advertising, right?
Right.
That advertising wasn't just external, that emotional connection, that powerful creative was as important internally as it was externally. So I like to take narrative up a notch.
I
Right. I don't
see.
think it's a written document. I think it's a very a visual piece. I think
Yep.
film has a unique role.
Right.
I think it's engaging, it's motivating, it's taking what we all know to be the power of advertising, but applying it in a very authentic way internally.
Got it. So for my audience that are comprised of marketers, entrepreneurs that are really want to get to the crux of the matter, if you need to distill your definition from brand purpose, what would it be?
I think that you really need to have a brand purpose that an organization can buy into and believes in. And then from there, you take it to the marketplace in all the tactical ways that we know work, but you think about the tactical components, not just being about you, the company, but being about the world around you.
Right. So it's got to stay at a very high purpose. It's not about you making money. It's about changing the environment, helping community. It needs to be a very high level. I mean, sometimes they call it ESG, which is kind of the, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the magic today for marketers
Mm-hmm.
is to understand that you have to go beyond features and benefits,
Right.
and that emotional connection is going to be created by the impact that you can have your brand have on society. And in many ways, I don't think many people have realized this, but I think there's a very unique linkage between ESG and brand purpose and marketing. And that's that ESG is today viewed as a financial metric, tracking what you're doing, by all means, very important.
Right.
But you can pull that work into your brand marketing and you can have a very differentiated position because of what your company is doing in ESG. Or you can promote more ESG work because you know it's a unique competitive advantage.
Right. And I would just say, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And for those who are kind of wondering. Cool. Another question I typically ask my guests is, since I'm wearing the visual storytelling hat, since you've been involved in so many visual storytelling programs at J&J, how do you define visual storytelling from your experience?
I think it is the ability to take what happens every day in the company
Mm-hmm.
and in the world and connect the two in a way that's very emotional and emotionally appealing. I think sometimes in this world of so much content, we all go down to original content,
Right.
user-generated content, huge roles for that.
Yep.
No doubt, huge roles. But I think we have to remember as brand marketers that there is still a very big role for that emotional content that sets the stage for perhaps the rest to follow on.
I see. All right. No, that makes sense. And maybe to help even further, marketers are notorious in coming up with new terms every time. So for people who are really quite confused, because we hear, maybe you can help make the distinctions between sponsored film, product placement, branded content, branded entertainment.
And it is all complicated, right?
Yeah.
And I think it all starts with, terms are confusing, but what's your real objective, right?
Right.
And if you know what your real objective is, then you can determine what the best approach is, right? For example, I look at branded entertainment as something that we did with the film 5B, and
Okay.
we'll have a chance to show a little clip from that. But that was a piece of film that really helped us to highlight the role of frontline healthcare workers during the HIV pandemic in the late 80s, early 90s. Ironically, that set the stage for what was to happen during the COVID pandemic for frontline healthcare workers. But it was branded entertainment because we were very clearly identified, but we didn't try to produce it ourselves. We used Hollywood talent to do it. So we brought together a very different combination. A co-creation model, not always easy because you have to relinquish control, but you also have to know where you're strategically heading. And in that co-creation model, I think you really can do top-notch branded entertainment. Now, that to me is different than a brand sponsorship of a piece of original content. For example, we for many years worked with Henry Louis Gates, who many may know as a leader in African American history in the United States.
Yes.
We sponsored his films and his work. That to me was a sponsorship. That was not branded entertainment. He did it. We were clearly identified as the sponsor.
So we basically just funded it.
Different ways.
You were not involved in the creation. I see.
Exactly.
I see.
Then another model that we used, which was a very unique model, was work that we did with a film called Unseen Enemy. And it was done in 2017. Again, a little frightening when I look back. It actually predicted the COVID pandemic. But the way we worked on that one is a little different. That was one where the film was so scientifically based and the producer director wanted to be sure that she had integrity. Yep. She produced the content. We became an outreach partner.
Oh,
right. So I don't know what you would call that in the terms, but basically we took the film, we sponsored CNN airing, and we had a very nice media package with CNN for both digital and on-air content. And incidentally was able to rerun that at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. But more importantly, we really made it stakeholder specific. So we took it out to stakeholders around the world. Some of them were healthcare professionals. Some of them were policymakers. And as a matter of fact, it was shown at the G20 in Germany in 2017. And as part of that film, the G20 actually had recommendations on pandemic preparedness. I don't know what you would call that. I call that thought leadership. Right.
Yeah,
and that's really setting the stage for the future. So again, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? And what's the best way to get there? And then the terms fall out from there.
Right. That makes sense. No, I think, I mean, to me, you actually touch, I mean, all these distinctions really break across the lines of either you are involved in the creation or you're just funding it. And then there's the container nature. Is it a film? Is it a video game? Is it a TV show, which stands still in the entertainment space? But then, any other material like books, even, articles that could fall into branded content. Definitely. So I think the entertainment is really defining just the containers that are classically known as entertainment filmed products. Great.
And again, what you want to achieve, right?
Exactly.
Or what is your ultimate goal for doing this work?
Right. Let's go back a little bit because I'm still want to anchor our discussion around brand purpose. So if you go back to your long career at J&J and the brand purpose methodologies and processes that you put in place, can you talk just at a high level, what is the process looks like, how do you start creating a brand purpose? And I'm going to put on the slide that you shared with me just to kind of people see what brand purpose you came up with as you speak.
Yeah. Right. And this was the Johnson & Johnson brand purpose.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a couple of fundamental things. I think that as marketers, we have to understand that our role is a little bit broader in creation of a purpose. It really becomes a strategic role where we really accept as an integrator across a large enterprise or a small enterprise.
Right.
But once you accept that role, you then start to realize that the crafting, the co-creation of a brand purpose is the key, and that's not done by an agency bringing it into an organization. I think, again, we all tend to use a model of we work with what we know.
Right.
But the real opportunity here is to build that with the people of the organization and the C-suite and bring everybody together in a unified way. Now, once you do that, I've learned that was only the easy part of the job. Right. That was in many ways the simpler part. When we did the J&J brand purpose, we brought 35 leaders across the organization together, worked with our EC. That was easy. The harder part was engaging the rest of the 130,000 employees across the organization.
And just quick question.
Co-create.
When you say co-creation, can you kind of unpack this? Is it like workshops with employees? What did you do? Research, surveys?
Yeah. So, yep. Nope. So we did a lot of ways. And I've done this, by the way, big and small companies.
Yep.
First of all, you have to know perceptions of your brand by your own people, by the marketplace. You have to marry those with what's happening in society. So we did, in all cases, kind of a pullback to look at the world around us and look at how we were perceived. Then there were workshops. That's exactly how we did them. Some were 1 day, some were 2 days, some were 3 days. But we really unpacked what we knew about ourselves and what we wanted to be through a series of exercises.
Oh, I see.
And those series of exercises brought forward what the company, the best of the company on its best day. And from all those pieces, we could collaboratively construct this brand purpose.
I see. Would you say that, and again, I'm assuming that as part of this co-creation discovery process, you really wanted to extract what is the current perceptions your employees have about J&J, what is the industry or the competition looks like about this perception, and then you kind of compared it to what your customer is actually thinking about J&J. So it's kind of it's like three bubbles that you need to kind of marry together.
And I think what we found, and it was really, particularly when we did the J&J purpose, we found that there were very much many similarities among all of our different stakeholder groups.
Right.
And that for J&J, it was clear it had been a very decentralized company. And what our employees wanted and what our customers wanted was us to come together around a more common mission that brought the company's pieces more holistically together.
Right. I see. And as you discover these new opportunities, maybe untapped themes that your competition is not covering, I guess that's where you wanted to go back and validate it with your internal workforce, customers, just to make sure, right?
That's exactly right. And you'll see here why we have heart, science, and ingenuity. We believe that was our differentiator. We were a beloved consumer brand. People knew us as a consumer brand. But we coupled with that amazing science and amazing business processes and operations that were introduced that were new. We knew that was our distinction.
I see.
But we also knew that there was a more fundamental reason why we brought those three together, and that was to change the trajectory of health, right? We really believed that in our unique combination, we could make health better for people around the world. And for anyone who's worked in healthcare, there is nothing more motivating to a workforce in healthcare to believe that they could do something bigger than just a simple product that they were working on, whether it be a consumer product or even a pharmaceutical product.
No, absolutely. And just to kind of emphasize what you said about science and ingenuity as differentiators, as part of this discovery, you want to make sure that sweet spot that you cover from your investigation on customer, competition, your employees
is
not something that your whole competitor is already doing. So you still want to make sure that that sweet spot you want to focus on for your brand purpose needs to be super unique. And it was the heart piece actually that brought the uniqueness to J&J, because if you rest in science, right, you rest with many other pharmaceutical brands. Well, one might argue that they were not born from a consumer brand, so they didn't understand the heart of gathering, right? And that was why, in many ways, that heart piece was first for a really important reason. We knew that that was our historical competitive advantage. And we needed to marry that with both science and ingenuity. Yeah. No, this is great. Really love this statement, how it came about. And do you find also as part of the preparation of this, you said it's 18-month long process to develop this, is there any also thoughts about in your mind, because another notion in the marketplace around brand purpose is that it always carries a sense of two polar values from a positive to negative that you bring to the marketplace. So in your case, obviously it's the positive is the more healthy world. So have you thought about that polarity in values that when you constructed this statement?
Yeah, and I'm going to help set the stage for the context of this statement. The perception of Johnson and Johnson, and this was done back in 2016, early 2017, was very much a company that was a baby company and a family health company.
Right.
For many reasons, right? The science and ingenuity were never brought forward. And frankly, it served the company well for many years. But we could no longer live like that. It was disingenuous. Our business was really a science-based business. And we needed to marry them. So this was in many ways a brand transformation.
Oh.
And while it was brand purpose, it led to a brand transformation.
Got it.
And let me talk a little bit about the process that we used. I mentioned that you co-created, but the co-creation didn't stop with the workshop. What we recognized was that leaders had to feel great about this. And this is where visual storytelling and purpose come together. So one of the most impactful things that we did is we took this purpose, we produced a powerful piece that brought it to life, very visual, very emotionally engaging, the concept of advertising for your internal audience.
Yep.
And we brought it forward to 1,300 leaders around the country, around the world, in what was a presentation followed by independent workshops.
I see.
And we garnered all kinds of feedback. Purpose never really changed, but the other piece that we worked hard on during the time period was building the strategic framework of the company. What did we stand for? What were we trying to achieve? And that's where we got a lot of good impact. So we had a purpose statement and a business strategy that originated from the piece. And it was that unique combination that helped us to bring things forward. And then what we did, and this is why it took the 18 months, we worked with each major part of the company, business units, global functions, and worked with them to say, how were they going to construct their promise to deliver on this purpose? And those were a series of workshops held around the world. So at the end of the day, you ended up with a purpose and promises that were each going to achieve it. So you achieve true alignment to it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I bet it's just a global effort to kind of connect all the dots and get commitment from all the leaders in the regional markets to commit to this statement and also express, how they're going to bring it to life in their strategies. That's, I'm sure it's incredible achievement.
Well, it was a big achievement. And then what we saw started to happen, it's exactly what you want. Once they were clear on their promises, they then began to create powerful visual storytelling that matched the bigger J&J, but applied to their specific business area. So we ended up with pieces that were used both externally and internally to speak to Johnson & Johnson, tied to a purpose. But if a pharmaceutical person was using it, they brought forward their promise in the context of the bigger purpose. Excellent. And we ended up with a wonderful base of storytelling opportunities that then could be pulled through in multiple ways, which is why, by the way, the branded content had the impact that it did, because then it gave something very tangible that our business units could take out to their customers to show that what we were doing to deliver on our science, our ingenuity, and our heart.
And that's what I keep saying also for my clients and students is that, if you have a powerful brand purpose, or in my context, I call it brand narrative, then the stories are just serving as proof point that actually validate your narrative and bring it to life. And that's exactly what you were describing. So that's amazing.
That's exactly what happened. Now, there was also another challenge that we tackled in 2019. While we were doing the kind of alignment that we were doing, we never made a broad statement to the marketplace about this is who we are. So here's where the importance of a creative framework coming out of your brand purpose comes in place. We created a very powerful brand purpose, or a creative platform, excuse me. And that was all about demonstrating how we were there for people every step of their healthcare journey.
Yeah.
And we produced very powerful creative that for the first time put the company together. And again, then your storytelling fell out of that, because you could show examples in farm, you could show examples. And we got to the point where we were then able to do much more digitally targeted work to certain groups, certain segments, showing how to cancer we were making an impact.
Right.
Showing
right.
how to HIV we were making an impact. And I can speak to HIV more if you'd like.
Yeah.
But
So
you began to see it all come together.
exactly. So now that we got a very deep look under the hood for brand purpose, let's switch gears now and talk about the stories that bring it to life. And I cannot, choose another perfect example than this award-winning sponsored film 5B that you were leading J&J. And can you give me just a general background about this film and what was the process behind it, the business goals that you came out?
So 5B was perfectly timed, because as we brought the purpose forward, as we brought the work forward in a broader statement, we wanted some proof points, right?
Yep.
And 5B became one of these proof points. The history of 5B was, first of all, strategically based. It was meant to show another aspect of J&J that people wouldn't traditionally know us at. And we had a 20-year history of work in HIV on treatments and a vaccine in development. So it was just perfectly aligned. It also did something else. It allowed us to combine that heart of the consumer business with all the research that was going on around the pharmaceutical world and HIV. So it was a unique combination. So 5B was a really unique opportunity. I will be honest, there were times that I held my breath because I was going to places that I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, right? And there were some great lessons learned along the way, but we did a very different model where, as again, back to the word co-creation, we had a very strong guiding brief. And that brief was briefed out in combination with CAA to a number of Hollywood producers. And we took in multiple components and multiple feedback on our request for proposals, and had several script options. And what we began to see was there was a story that emerged among the others. And it was 5B. It was actually Ward 5B at San Francisco General Hospital. And it highlighted the nurses that had played such a critical role in the treatment of HIV patients in the late 80s and early 90s. And strategically, it was a perfect fit. We wanted to talk about our work in HIV, and we also were just traditionally a long-term heritage in supporting nurses and advocating for nurses. So the combo was perfect.
I see.
So we went ahead and produced the piece, had a few complications along the way. Fortuitously, it came out, following on to the work that we were doing with the broader expression to the marketplace. And we had a very interesting model. We funded up front, but we sold the film for distribution. And the film was bought and distributed by Riot Media. So the great news there is we both had skin in the game. Frankly, we didn't bear the whole cost. And we had a really powerful piece of content for a really nominal fee.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because when we go back to the old days of product placement, you just get, this kind of small space to integrate your product, but that's it. In what you've done, you actually you're responsible from day one to the creation, to the whole concept of the film, and you actually used a very well-known entertainment container, which is the documentary film, and actually you actually market and distribute it in the traditional channels of, showing up in festivals and then getting bought by Riot Studios. So you actually treated it as if you are a production studio, in essence.
That's right. That's exactly what we did. And we learned some lessons along the way, by the way. Right. So we were excited for the movie premiere. Well, it was fine. But honestly, the amount of attention that it got in theaters wasn't what we had hoped for. But we found something new. We found that this was exactly the right conduit into stakeholder marketing.
I see.
And that what we were able to do was target out stakeholders for this film and use it as a way to garner bringing these groups together and frankly building that brand love and that brand authenticity that every brand wants to have. And very specifically, we worked with the HIV community and LGBTQ communities, and we were at festivals, we were at HIV conferences, we were around the world in many places, we were in policy arenas. So all of a sudden, you had this company with these stakeholders that cared about a topic you brought to life, very much indebted to you. And it built and built and built. The only thing that stopped its progress was the pandemic, when a lot of things stopped.
Yeah.
But it was a piece that lives on. It is now part of nursing school curriculum. So every nurse in the United States, and now we're working globally, will see this film as part of their training and be inspired by heroes.
No, this is fantastic. I want to play the clip that you shared with me, and I think this actually will help people see a little bit about, what you meant by this incredible achievement.
They wanted to quarantine us on an island.
I'd seen the patients being marginalized, and I just found it infuriating.
People were like, you're probably going to get AIDS and you're probably going to die. I am more pissed off and angry than I am scared. We have to do something.
At San Francisco General, the staff is opening up a special wing to treat AIDS victims. It was built by the nurses there.
We were gay, we were straight, we were young, we were old.
We decided if we can't save these folks, we're going to touch them.
This was a tangible thing you could do. Wash them, put moisturizer on them.
So much in life is not what you say or what you do, it's how you make people feel.
You don't have to have a hazmat suit every time you're around an AIDS person. You don't have to burn their bed because they died.
It brought change for how hospitals work.
The nurses were the real heroes. They stood up when nobody else would, and they were willing to take those risks.
Johnson & Johnson is deeply committed to the treatment and prevention of HIV. 5B was proudly commissioned by Johnson & Johnson as part of the company's longstanding commitment to the support of nurses and other health professionals at the front lines of care.
Yep. Excellent. I mean, this is amazing, film, and what I got from it, there was this quote which he says, people don't care about what you say or do. It's really how you make people feel. I think this is so powerful, the role of emotions. And because that's if you think back, what are the most memorable things? Typically, there is a emotional hashtag attached to them. That's why you remember them.
Exactly. And why it's so important for brands to stand something for more than something, right? Beyond themselves. I mean, you could have talked about your HIV treatments, which, by the way, were really revolutionary treatments.
Right.
But that wasn't where you created the connection. It was
exactly
people.
Yeah. So true. And you also touched on the fact that unlike traditional advertising, that you buying media, in this case, the film has its costs, to produce, but you didn't have to buy media, right? Which is unusual, and you got pretty much free publicity after the film was released.
We did. And again, I'll say the lesson learned is if you take a piece like this and you try to do the traditional mass market, you'll have some success.
Yep.
But the real success was the targeted stakeholder marketing.
Right.
And that's where you really establish the relationship with the brand.
I see. So when you actually did the post analysis of this campaign around 5B, what were the KPIs you were tracking?
So it was interesting. We had a couple of different ones. We looked at 5B in relation to multiple other projects that we were doing. And we have J&J has a proprietary system that's able to measure its impact on reputation and brand equity. And we saw 5B even though it was new and relatively, I would say, small as compared to something like the Campaign for Nursing's Future, which we've done for 20 years,
Right.
you saw it resonate with your stakeholders. Then what we really saw powerful is we delved down into stakeholder marketing, and we were able to see pre and post perceptions of the brand.
Oh, I see.
And that's what I've learned over time. I would caution everybody. I don't think I did a good enough job of this all along. But your traditional KPIs, you will show some impact with this type of work. But when you are very crystal clear on your targeting strategy and you do pre and post, and you measure brand attributes, that's where you see your movement.
I see. So if we need to summarize, you basically started this film with the goal of driving brand awareness around your work in this particular field.
Correct.
And then as you started the analysis, you basically compared the before and after along a variety of brand attributes to see how perceptions have changed. Have you done any social listening also as part of this effort to see what people are talking about?
Yeah, we did a lot of social listening. I'm glad you asked me that question. And it was amazing to us how much people became advocates for the film. Right. It was, if you look at a lot of trust barometers, people believe people most like themselves. And what was really fascinating were the amount of nurses talking about the film to other nurses. Now, we helped that along in some of the work that we were doing because we had very strong reach into the nursing community. But the ability for nurses to talk to nurses, the other piece we saw in the HIV community too, and in the LGBTQ, it gave these communities and the people who were engaged in these communities things to talk about with their peers that they felt very positive and warm about.
I see.
So it was a hidden benefit, and the social listening helped us get there. We should have guessed that, by the way.
Yeah.
We should have understood that. But when you do something so new, and that's another thing I've learned, is that sometimes you go into it and you have a perception and you think you have a strategy, but the real truth is it never comes through exactly as planned. And you have to be agile and listening and willing to move every step of the way.
Yeah. So based on your experience of working on brand purpose across a variety of programs, both for internal and external purposes, what do you see are the most common misconceptions brands have about brand purpose these days?
I think a couple of them. I think one is that it can be created in a vacuum, right? And have real authenticity. Cannot happen, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, it's a marketing platform. Cannot be the case. It's got to be a platform that is owned by the people of the company. But thirdly, that it is something that just can be created and nourished every once in a while. And the truth is it has to be lived every day.
I see. And who is the typical function in an organization that drive the brand purpose? Is it a subdivision within marketing? Is it corporate development?
See, I think it can depend on the organization. And I think that one thing you have to be sensitive to when you do this work, you have to know your organization, right? Your adeptness to understand how to move things through your organization is probably the most important piece of owning brand purpose. I think you can be a catalyst as a marketer, but you can't do it by yourself. Brand purpose is a huge competitive advantage in today's war for talent. You only achieve that by your partnership with your HR community.
Right.
It can be a huge driver and a huge way to elevate your ESG work, but you can only do that in partnership with your sustainability, CSR, and now even legal teams.
Right.
It can be a huge driver for individual business lines, but you can only achieve that by working with individual business leaders. So it's, again, know your organization. Do I believe marketing has the role to drive this? I really do. But you have to think much more like a general manager if you are to accomplish the goal.
Well said. Yeah, it's all about the integrated perspectives that you need to bring into this process. You cannot do it within the confines of the marketing department.
Exactly. You won't be successful. You'll get great copy out there, and you might get a good piece of digital storytelling out there and visual storytelling, but it'll end there.
Right. Won't be validated by the other perspectives. Yeah. So now we've talked about, brand purpose. We talked about one example of a great story, 5B, that brought it to life tremendously. One of the things that I'm sure on the mind of many people right now, since we're still in the pandemic, can you talk a little about your experience at J&J in terms of visual storytelling strategy, how it has changed during the pandemic, pre-vaccine and post-vaccine?
Yeah, I think that like anything, for a while, the vaccine was absolutely what everyone focused on and cared on. And we did a lot of visual storytelling and a lot of our original episodes coming out of our own content studios. But I think what we started to realize was that the pandemic fatigue set in, right? Yeah. And if you're working in medicine, cancer didn't stop happening.
Right.
Hypertension didn't stop happening. Your OTCs were more important than ever. So I think as we began to look at the end of the pandemic, and I'm going to call it the endemic world, because I think we'll eventually get there where it's with us all the time, but it doesn't dominate us, right? We started to recognize that it was back to where we were a few years ago, that this broader base of all that we do to make people healthy had to still be the focus. So I think in answering your question, the lesson learned was your strategy may have shifted for a bit of time, but you still have to be responsive to people who need to live healthy lives all the time. And one of the things that we did during the pandemic, which was really almost the final chapter of brand purpose, J&J operated as very separate companies with separate brand names and separate patient and customer experiences.
Right.
And we used the pandemic time to allow all that had to happen on the vaccine to happen, but also to build out what we call a master brand framework. And as I left, different business units are looking at how they will both adapt the J&J name, so we'll have more J&J in the marketplace,
right,
and begin to unify customer experiences so that the purpose was not only brought out by the people at the corporate level. When it was brought out by the individual business units, it would begin to be branded Johnson & Johnson with similar experiences across.
I see. That's interesting.
And that was a really big culture change. That's about knowing your organization. That couldn't have been done in the beginning. The culture change was too big. It had to wait till its right time.
Yeah. And actually, I was doing a series of webinars during the first wave of the pandemic back in March 2020. It was all about visual storytelling in times of COVID. And I did a survey or kind of review of how brands communicate during this time. So I'm kind of wondering, because at that time, when we're thinking about the first wave, March 2020, most brands didn't know quite how to empathize with the audience. It was novelty. And as
it was a novelty.
And then, as time passes, then it was really more about, as you said, pandemic fatigue. So there's, again, another change in strategy. So can you talk about those two, poles of consumer behavior?
So I do think that, and I think this is true, it was easier for a healthcare company that was dedicated to global health issues to be more empathetic, to understand how to operate in this environment in an easier way. That's why I referred to the work in HIV. HIV was a pandemic too in its time.
Yeah.
So by understanding all those dynamics, I think it became much easier for a company like Johnson & Johnson to adapt to the pandemic. I think the lesson learned was that you couldn't stay in that pandemic mode forever.
Yeah.
That we needed to evolve back to going through the pandemic fatigue and talking and helping people understand health was bigger than just COVID.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the issues, and again, our business units working by brand purpose began to adopt to this. People weren't doing routine medical procedures, right? So there were campaigns to help people get routine medical procedures done.
Yeah.
There was the recognition that our doctors were healthcare professionals. Not all of them were working on the front lines. There were those that were running office-based practices that weren't getting patients in. Guess what? They were small business owners. right? What did that mean for their financial viability, and how did we help address those? So I think you could use brand purpose understanding what people were going through during the pandemic, but also understanding the hidden issues and recognizing that you had to overcome pandemic fatigue, and that healthcare issues remained even though everybody was worried about COVID.
I see. So the brand purpose that you actually created in the course of 18 months was actually still relevant during the first wave of the pandemic.
Relevant.
And then, when you reached post-vaccine and people, where the message needs to adapt it to how to live with the virus, it's also made sense there because, again, you're all about making the world healthier, and you're focusing on science, focusing on ingenuity. All these pillars still remain the same. Yeah, got it.
Exactly. It was funny as I look at what brand purpose did. It prepared the organization to make us ready to play a major role in the pandemic. And then it also allowed us to understand how to evolve beyond that role. So again, it's back to purpose is strategic. It's not an advertising campaign. It's not a marketing campaign.
It's a long-term
strategic basis.
Yeah. And speaking about, your lessons from that period during the pandemic, a lot of brands were not prepared, pretty much didn't have any, playbook for crisis. So have you kind of did you feel like that you had to optimize, you kind of update your playbooks for how to deal during, post-crisis?
Yeah, I think we did. And I think what you learned though, and I really do believe this to be the case, I think it's important that you realize crisis has a boundary.
Right.
And that you operate like that for a given period of time, but that you remain very sensitive to the world around you, understanding where the world is and understanding where the perception of your brand is. And again, that agility and flexibility continue to be part of your strategy. You can't stay in crisis forever.
Yeah, that's well said. Great. So, Sarah, this is an amazing conversation. You shared so much great insights. I want to finish up, if you can summarize, your top 3 tips for marketers who are looking to start their own brand purpose program, and maybe around sports film or around other entertainment container. What would you say would they be?
So I would say my number 1 tip is make it more than just a marketing focus, right?
Yep.
If you cannot move an entire organization, which is challenging, find a key partner in another functional area. I'd suggest today marketing and HR have a huge combination that can be really powerful as we are entering the great resignation and the war for talent. So that would be my number 1 tip for you. Don't go it alone.
Yep.
My second tip would be look at what is authentic to you. Don't try to be something that you're not. And when it is authentic and when it's built together, then you can get into executions that make sense. For some companies, it will be sponsored films. For others, it might be digital engagements. It might be new customer experiences. But let what you know about your brand and what you know about your market be your guide, and take some risks. And don't be afraid to take the risks, and don't be afraid to learn along the way. Be agile and adjust.
Brilliant. No, this is solid gold advice, especially because a lot of people really don't know how to navigate this new world where, audiences are really expecting much deeper, especially if you're looking at millennials, Gen Zs. It's not yesterday's audiences. They're looking for much deeper meanings and things that could sustain them, to believe in the brand in long term, just not fulfilling, immediate pain point.
That's right. It is a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And I think you have to build those relationships in very targeted ways. You need a mass market a perception of who you are, but you need to go to advocacy and intimacy on a stakeholder by stakeholder basis.
Yeah. All right. So before we go, if our audience have any questions for you, how can they reach out?
So I'd encourage them to reach out to me via LinkedIn. I think they can see that I'm active on LinkedIn, and
Yep.
reaching out to me is, for right now, probably the best way. And I would love to engage questions, provide counsel, give input, and I'm hoping to hear from many of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. I've learned a ton, from you today. It's incredible experience you're bringing in the brand purpose and the visual storytelling space. And for all of you watching or listening, hope to see you next time. So in the meantime, keep those purpose-driven stories coming. See you next time. Thank you.
Visual Storytelling Today is recorded in Miami, Florida. The show is published exclusively by Visual Storytelling Institute. Learn more at visualstorytell.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on the iTunes Store. Until next time, don't let your big story wait to be told.